Back around the 1830s, when Michigan became a state, the pioneers were cutting trees to build log cabins like this one. Not only did they have to cut the logs down to build their home, but they also needed to clear the land to put the house on. As the pioneers continued to do this, they discovered that this was an important economic activity. Remember that economic activity is how people use natural resources to make goods or get services. Over the last couple of days we have been talking about the economic activity of farming. But not all pioneers could be farmers. The pioneers who worked to cut down trees were called lumberjacks. Towns grew around areas with fertile soil due to farming. Towns also grew in areas near forests due to the logging industry. A logging camp was built at the site where the lumberjacks would be cutting the trees. Lumbering was a good industry for Michigan because we had many white pines in our northern forest, and white pines were the most popular wood used to build in the 1800s. Lumber companies moved to Michigan due to a scarcity in other areas. Behind me you see what a typical building at a logging camp would look like. Here is a group of men in their bunkhouse at a logging camp. The lumbering industry became very important to Michigan's economic growth. The fur trade had ended due to the scarcity of the beaver, and Michigan needed an industry to take over. Michigan was ideal for lumbering because of all of our rivers. Let's talk about the lumbering process. First, a site was picked for logging. Second, a logging camp was built that would include a bunkhouse, stable, blacksmith shop, and cookhouse. Once this was complete, the workers could move in. When winter came, the lumberjack would begin cutting the trees. Before the trees could be loaded onto the sleighs, all of the branches needed to be cut off. After the logs were loaded onto the sleighs, horses pulled the sleighs through the snow down to the river. Stumpers then marked the logs as to whom they belonged. When the river started to melt, the logs were pushed in. River hogs then rode them down to the mouth of the river, where boomers took over. The boomers would separate the logs by companies and then float them down the river to the sawmill. At the sawmills, the logs were cut into boards. Once cut, they were stacked to dry before being loaded on ships to cities like Chicago or Detroit.